Bridges are impressive constructions, but sometimes things go wrong. This can be due to problems with how the bridge was made, bad weather, or putting too much weight on it. It's kind of like when you're playing with your building blocks and they all fall down. But when it happens with big bridges, it can be very serious. People can get hurt and things can get broken. Sadly, many countries have had problems with bridges falling down, and this has cost them lots of money. So let's explore the 5 worst bridges collapses ever in this video from Superstructures. Number 5 on our list takes us back to December 15, 1967, when a tragedy struck the Silver Bridge. This gleaming silver structure connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and Gallipolis, Ohio, spanning over the Ohio River. At the time, it was the gateway to the South and a symbol of better commutes. During peak rush hour that fateful day, disaster struck. The bridge suddenly collapsed, sending 31 cars and their occupants plummeting into the icy waters of the Ohio River. Out of the 64 people in those cars, a heartbreaking 46 lost their lives. The cause of this catastrophic collapse was traced back to a tiny defect in one particular part of the bridge. A 55-foot-long section of steel, 2 inches thick and 12 inches wide. This section fractured and the pin holding it in place came loose, setting off a chain reaction of structural failures. Many who used the bridge had noticed its tendency to sway and shake, which was a cause for concern. Ben Setter, a salesman who had crossed the bridge just 15 minutes before the tragedy, later admitted, "I was worried about that bridge every time I crossed over." The most tragic part of this story is that there was no way for engineers or maintenance crews to detect this critical defect. To prevent it, they would have had to disassemble the entire joint, which would have been as problematic as the defect itself. This catastrophe led to the implementation of the National Bridge Inspection Standards, ensuring that bridges with spans over 20 feet are inspected every 2 years. If a bridge is deemed high risk, it's checked even more frequently, sometimes as often as monthly, until it can be repaired. In the aftermath of the Silver Bridge collapse, many other bridges were scrutinized and reinforced with better components. Additionally, Silver Bridge's sister bridge in nearby St. Mary's, West Virginia, was taken out of service in 1971. Number 4 on our list takes us back in time to the tragedy of the Ponte de Barca Bridge. This medieval bridge, originally constructed at the beginning of the 16th century and later renovated in 1761 and 1896, stood as a vital structure to protect the Lima River. Nestled within the picturesque Ponte de Barca hamlet in the beautiful Minho region, this bridge held historical significance as a stopping point on the road to Santiago de Compostela in Spain. It was a testament to architectural craftsmanship designed by Carlos Amarante, and officially opened for traffic on August 15, 1806. This bridge was celebrated as the first link between Porto and Gaia. However, a grim chapter unfolded on March 29, 1809. During Napoleon's Second French invasion, General Soult's army marched on the city of Porto with the intention of wreaking havoc. As the French forces approached, panic swept through the city, and many desperate civilians tried to escape across the Ponte de Barca Bridge. Tragically, this bridge was not designed to support so many people at once, and with the overwhelming number of panicked residents, it gave way. The collapse of the Ponte de Barca Bridge resulted in the tragic loss of over 4,000 lives, including the Portuguese and even some French people. This devastating incident stands as one of the worst bridge collapses in history. To make matters even more heart-wrenching, some individuals were forced to jump into the river by French troops, compounding the misery of this dark episode in history. Number 3 on our list takes us to the heart of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where a catastrophic event shook the nation slightly over 15 years ago. The Interstate 35 West Bridge, a major route that spanned the mighty Mississippi River in downtown Minneapolis, suddenly gave way. The collapse sent cars, trucks, and even a school bus, which was inching forward in bumper-to-bumper rush hour traffic, plummeting into the river below and onto the rocky shore. This heart-wrenching tragedy claimed the lives of 13 people, while another 145 individuals were injured, many of them suffering severe injuries. The catastrophe jolted not only the city but also the entire nation. It served as a harsh reminder of the dire state of the country's aging and crumbling infrastructure. The aftermath of the I-35 West Bridge collapse ignited immediate calls in Minnesota and across the United States to make substantial investments in repairing and replacing the nation's deteriorating infrastructure. More than a decade and a half later, experts highlight that there have been some improvements. But the sobering reality remains. There are still tens of thousands of bridges nationwide that require urgent repair or replacement. As the dust settled, the Minnesota Department of Transportation came under intense scrutiny. The Interstate Highway Bridge had been classified as structurally deficient, indicating it was aging and in need of repair. In fact, some repair work was in progress when the catastrophic collapse occurred. Compounding the issues, the bridge had also been rated as fracture critical, meaning that the failure of even a single vital component could trigger the entire bridge to collapse. Number 2 on our list takes us back to a somber Christmas Eve in 1953, on the shores of the Whanganui River, 10 kilometers west of Whanganui in New Zealand's central North Island. At 10:21 p.m., tragedy struck as the Wellington-Auckland Night Express train, filled with 285 passengers and crew, plunged into the flooded river, marking one of New Zealand's darkest railway disasters. Of the souls on board that fateful night, 151 met their untimely end, making it New Zealand's deadliest railway accident at the time. This catastrophic event sent shockwaves across the nation, which had a population of just over 2 million people. Almost every New Zealander had a personal connection to someone involved in the disaster. The place was known as Tangiwai, which aptly translates to weeping waters in Maori. The timing of the tragedy compounded the heartbreak. Most passengers were on their way home for Christmas, bearing gifts for their loved ones. The families eagerly awaiting the arrival of their dear ones at various stations along the route were blissfully unaware of the impending catastrophe that would forever change their lives. In the days that followed, searchers discovered many battered and mud-soaked presents, toys, and teddy bears scattered along the banks of the Whanganui River. For New Zealand, 1953 had been a year marked by significant milestones. In May, Sir Edmund Hillary reached the summit of Mount Everest, and on the 23rd of December, the nation was abuzz with excitement as the young Queen Elizabeth II and her husband Prince Philip graced New Zealand with their presence. However, all of these jubilant events took a drastic turn on Christmas Day, when Prime Minister Sidney Holland somberly conveyed news of the tragic accident in a radio broadcast from the military camp at Whanganui. With no newspapers published on Christmas Day, this was the first time many New Zealanders learned of the heart-wrenching events that had unfolded. The catastrophic events of that evening were compounded by the seemingly clear weather on Christmas Eve. With the little recent rainfall, no one could have predicted the disaster that was about to unfold at the Whanganui River. At around 7 p.m., a goods train safely crossed the bridge and the river appeared normal. However, the situation took a dramatic turn due to a sudden release of approximately 2 million cubic meters of water from the crater lake of nearby Mount Ruapehu. This unleashed a massive 6-meter high wave containing a mixture of water, ice, mud, and rocks, which surged down the Whanganui River like a tsunami. Sometime between 10:10 and 10:15 p.m., this destructive force collided with the concrete pylons of the Tangiwai Railway Bridge, hurtling at a speed of approximately 65 kilometers per hour. Just after 10:21 p.m., the locomotive KA949 and its train, composed of 9 carriages and 2 vans, reached the severely weakened bridge. As the bridge crumbled beneath their weight, the locomotive plunged into the river, dragging all 5 second-class carriages with it. The intensity of the torrent completely destroyed 4 of these carriages, leaving those inside with little hope of survival. The leading first-class carriage, known as Car Z, teetered on the edge of the ruined bridge for a few harrowing minutes before breaking free from the remaining 3 carriages and toppling into the river. It was carried downstream before eventually coming to rest on a riverbank as the water level subsided. Astonishingly, 21 of the 22 passengers in this carriage managed to survive. Evidence from the scene indicated that the locomotive's driver, Charles Parker, had taken immediate action by applying the emergency brakes approximately 200 meters from the bridge. This courageous act prevented the last 3 carriages from ending up in the river, ultimately saving many lives. To this day, the Tangiwai Bridge collapse stands as one of the most devastating tragedies in the history of New Zealand. The most tragic bridge collapse in our list is the Ulyanovsk Railway Bridge catastrophe, which occurred on June 5, 1983. The bridge, which had been in service since 1916 and was known as the largest railway bridge in Europe, met its devastating end. The cause of this catastrophic event was a collision with a cruise ship named the Alexander Suvorov. On that fateful day, the Alexander Suvorov was on a journey from Rostov to Moscow, carrying more than 400 passengers. The ship was supposed to pass under another section of the bridge, the second span. However, due to its high speed and most passengers being occupied with an auction on the upper deck, no one on board noticed that the ship was headed in the wrong direction. It wasn't until later that the bridge controllers realized the ship's perilous course, and they attempted to send a warning signal. Regrettably, they received no response in time. Tragically, the span of the bridge tore through the ship's upper deck where most of the passengers were located. Fortunately, the lower deck remained intact. However, this unfortunate collision resulted in the loss of over 170 lives, as well as causing damage to the bridge itself and the derailment of other train cars, some of which fell onto the ship during the accident. That's a wrap on some of the most heart-wrenching bridge disasters in history. If you found this video informative and engaging, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. By doing so, you'll stay connected with superstructures and won't miss out on any of our upcoming content. That's all from us today. Until next time, take care and goodbye.